Level design is the process of creating individual game levels. This involves laying out the geography of the game level, as well as placing all the stuff of the game into it: the avatar, enemies, pickups, environmental props, and so on. How this is done technically depends a lot on the particular tool being used to make the game, but creatively there are a few universal level design concepts that are especially useful for new designers to be aware of. Before you set out to design a level, you should have a good understanding of your game's overall creative vision, and in particular, the mechanics and specific challenge of your game. Being specific here is important. A precision platformer game, where the player has to land very difficult jumps, requires the levels to be arranged in a very different way than, say, a combat-focused platformer with lots of enemies to blast. As a level designer, the core of what you're doing is arranging the level's space. Space, you may recall, is one of the 6 key elements of a game system. A game's space deeply affects its design and challenge. The game of basketball would feel very different, even with the same mechanics, components, rules, and so on, if it was played on a court a mile long. Many designers pick a certain feel they want to achieve with their level's space, and keep it in mind as they lay out the level and make other design choices. Even within the same precision platforming game, a designer might create one level with a very wide-open feel and another with a super claustrophobic one. In a shooter, a designer might create one level with lots of enemies densely packed together, creating the feeling of the player being overrun. Another level might have very few enemies in a large open area with many places for them to hide, creating an eerie, tense atmosphere where the player feels like she could be attacked at any moment. While good level designs often maintain a consistent feel like this, they don't always do it by hitting the same note. Good level designs vary things like difficulty, intensity, and pacing within the same overall feel. One way to do this is by creating different zones of challenge within a level. Almost every game you've ever played does this, and it's not hard to understand why. Think about a first-person shooter where a really intense battle sequence is followed by a quieter sequence where the player explores a new section of the map. The battle zone of challenge gets your heart pounding and is great fun, but most players would get overwhelmed if an entire 10-hour game was that intense. The exploration zone gives the player a chance to recover and experience a different kind of challenge. A pretty common and effective level design pattern is to have several sections that alternate easier, more relaxed zones with more intense ones, ultimately leading up to the most intense zone, like a boss fight at the end of the level. Some levels proceed linearly with only one path for the player to follow, like moving from left to right along a single path in a traditional 2D platformer. But if your level design gives the player choice about how to proceed, it's important that that choice be meaningful. We'll talk about meaningful choice in depth in another video, but from a level design perspective, if your player doesn't have some reason to, say, prefer going left rather than right, her choice isn't meaningful. Good level designers include information, like a subtle trail of slime to follow to where the alien you're pursuing is hiding, to clue the player in on how to navigate their levels. Great level design is an art, and like any other art, it takes years of honing your craft to develop it. But focusing on these tips at the start of your level design career will help you create more engaging designs.